just a quick words also about DGAP. It's a non-partisan, non-governmental think tank based in Berlin. I committed to fostering impactful foreign and security policy, both on a German and European level. And as Hans mentioned already, I'm leading the project InfoX. And the following remarks, this presentation, are very much based on my observation within this project, which has been running since 2018. I was especially pleased to read Marc's report and was instantly thinking, okay, we have to do an event on this and talk a bit more about what is different, what is similar between the French and the German experience in de-radicalization disengagement work. So I'm very happy that we made this event, and I'm also pleased to see the huge interest from the public to hear about our different insights. So before I begin, quick words about the project itself. So as Hans mentioned, it's a project in cooperation with the Federal Agency for Migration and Refugees, the BAMF, and its civil society and governmental network partners who are working on tertiary prevention of Islamist extremism, so basically de-radicalization and disengagement work. It's both a national and international cross-institutional expert peer learning, so between policy, research, and practice of actors working in tertiary prevention of Islamist extremism in Germany. And what we do international closed-door workshops. We have publications, you can see them on our website. Among them also the publication on on risk assessment that Marc mentioned. We do a newsletter and also public discussions. Where do we do that? On, let's say, neutral grounds in Berlin. But now we have moved last year to the digital domain. So as I said, when looking at France and Germany in the past years, many people have always said, well, you know, these countries are very different. My colleagues working at DGAP on defense and foreign policy in these countries might confirm it's difficult to bring different mindsets together. And I think this holds also true for de-radicalization and disengagement work. So first, let's have a look at some of the differences in these two countries. So of course, one of the main differences maybe is the centralist approach of France. Many things are really focusing on Paris, but it's worth noting that in the past years, more and more has been of the responsibility of de-radicalization and disengagement work has been given to the prefects to a more regional level. But also to a non-governmental organization such as the program that Marc mentioned. In Germany, the approach is very much federal, so internal security is responsibility of the federal states, and every state has developed, let's say, his or her own approach to some sense. So we have a kind of a patchwork of exit work in Germany. Traditionally, France has also been more focusing on a security approach, including, for example, a lot of counterterrorism legislation and laws. But again, this has been changing in the past years. Germany has, as I said, from state to state, different approaches, some more focusing on a security approach. But there is also a discourse of a whole of society approach that's necessary to tackling prevention of Islamist extremism. What is also interesting is that France has long-standing experiences dealing with sects, so exit work, helping people exiting from sects or sect-like structures, and has also entered the actual prevention work in a social work logic rather late in the European comparison. Whereas in Germany, we have long-standing experiences with left and right-wing exit work. And there has been a rather, let's say, uncontrolled extension or uncontrolled growth to Islamist extremism, as I said, like a patchwork in different states, how they approach this topic and how they have grown the sector of exit work in Islamist extremism. Of course, both countries have several challenges. Among them, for example, also the cooperation with religious actors that Marc has also mentioned. But I think some stand out, and also this is something that Marc has mentioned, in France, the laïcité. So the really interesting question how the state is separated from the church or from religion. And this is one or partly a reason why France, in my opinion, has been rather reluctant to address the topic of prevention of a religiously motivated extremism. And another aspect is also the problem of prisons. Robert will talk more about this later on in terms of German experience, but one of the consequences of a rather security-heavy approach of long sentences is that there are a huge number of either considered radicalized inmates or inmates incarcerated for terrorism-related offenses. And this is something that also France has been tackling more and more in the past years. In Germany, one of the challenges I would like to mention is information exchange. There's a huge debate about confidentiality, what kind of personal data between actors of exit work can be exchanged, what are the obligations as well, what are responsibilities, and there's a lot of insecurity actually about how to deal with these topics, and if there is too much or not enough legislation on these issues and how to implement them. So I think it can be said that France is engaging in a process of finding the right approach to exit work, doing very encouraging steps, as we heard from Marc, and also positive is that there is increasing, working with non-governmental actors. So it's not only a question of what the state does, but also what other actors in society can contribute in their experience. Whereas in Germany, I would say after this uncontrolled growth and quite some experience, the focus is much more on how can we, exchange knowledge, how can we go towards a more coherent approach and learn from each other also in a European setting. And then just very quickly, of course, despite these differences in the approaches or in the context of deradicalization work, of course, we're facing in a European setting very common challenges. Just to name a few, the radicalization in and after prison and also the exit work of those that have been incarcerated and then leave prison, dealing with returning foreign fighters, of course. Then again, as I mentioned, cooperation with religious actors is a touchy topic. And then also the question of, if more and more actors of society and state are involved in the question of preventing Islamist extremism, there is the danger of this logic of permanent suspicion. So where does it end? What are the consequences? Maybe also unintended consequences. And last but not least, the radicalization work is a lot about finding an alternative vision or a new identity, helping people exit violence and Islamist extremism and finding a new kind of vision for their life, a new kind of belonging. And so this brings the question back to us. So what kind of vision for society can we actually as societies provide? In both countries, not only France and Germany, but also other countries are having a lot of difficulties to ask that question, but also to answer that question. And now, what I found really interesting about the report is that when I read it, so many aspects really resonated with the experiences that we have made at InfoX over the past years. Many discussions with, as I said, actors from civil society, but also from government, from research, from security agencies. So that's why it's really worth highlighting. Some have already been mentioned by Marc in the, I think, main challenges of Paris. So I will just quickly go through them. One of the really interesting questions is that how to establish trust. And this is not only between the counselor and the client or the participant, but also between actors. So between an actor coming from a civil society background with someone who's working in prison and probation, somebody working in a security agency or another governmental structure. And trust needs time to be established and is also easily broken. So also Marc gave some examples, and this is really a crucial issue. And also the question of turnover really feeds into this question. How can we, turnover in civil society actors, but also in governmental structures that have turnover or different positions? How can we have a long-term relationship of trust between these actors? Another question that is also true for both contexts in France and in Germany is, how do we assess potential security risks? What kind of risk assessment tools do we use? What are the consequences? What are shortcomings? But how can we also assess potentials? How do we take this into consideration? And how can we actually, come together from a logic of really actuary and risk assessment tools to assessing risk and potential from a civil society perspective, which is not necessarily the same thing, but can be very, very different. Also, something that I felt was very much resonating with both experiences is that there's so different institutional cultures between more of a logic of having the objective to reintegrate an individual in society, and on the other hand, more logic of preventing security risks. So, but also other aspects of institutional culture, of hierarchy, for example, that have to be dealt with when working on a daily basis. And then, as I said, especially in the case of Germany, how to exchange information. This is also something that Marc highlighted in his report, which I found really interesting. Do we need more legislation? How is this legislation implemented? Do we need more rules for exchange of information between different actors without breaking this trust, for example, between the counselor and the client? And then also how to provide effective support. What kind of backgrounds do we need in de-radicalization work? What kind of formation? What kind of training? And this is not only true for civil society actors, but also for governmental actors in prison and probation and so on. So I think this is also the question of what kind of capabilities and competencies do we need to do this kind of work effectively and efficiently as well. And finally, it's really encouraging to see that there has been no case of recidivism, and in general, recidivism is quite low, let's say, relative to other kind of cases. But then the question is, how do you define recidivism, as also Marc mentioned? Is it only terrorism cases or other kind of criminal activities? And then it leads to a broader question of how to make prevention work more sustainable, and also in terms of structures, who should be responsible for what, and how to establish really sustainable funding structures as well. And then from this comparison and thinking about the two experiences, and of course, it's difficult because Marc has written a great report and a great insightful study on one exit program, whereas my experiences come from different experiences from all over Germany. I nevertheless would say that there are three basic insights that I would like to share with you. So first of all, and also this is something that Marc has mentioned, professionalization. So not only training, but also my recommendation would be have people who work together also train together, have them learn from each other, have them understand their differences, and gain respect for the other's work. I think this is really crucial, because this kind of training also can create trust and a different kind of relationship that can also lead to a better kind of working relationship in the end. Second, really leads into what Marc has been doing, and this is something that has been also gaining more traction in a European context. The importance of evaluation. So really encourage a culture of evaluation from the beginning of the project to really incorporate all actors that are engaged in the program, in the project, and learn from mistakes, because we will make mistakes. There's no way around it, but at least take it as a positive learning example and try to transfer good practices then to other contexts as far as possible. And finally, also focus on complementing competences. So really, something that we at InfoX are trying to do is to create more spaces for cross-institutional, as I said, and also international knowledge exchange. And this is what I would like to end my presentation on, is that what I really found is that, yes, there are differences, and it's not as easy as we thought to transfer good practices between one context and one country, but really to learn from each other. I think is a great way forward, and that's why I'm really happy that we are doing this event, and I'm looking forward to your questions. Thank you.